In this video, you're going to discover 11 different cabin types for 11 different types of travelers, one of which is likely to be you. I'm Gary Bembridge of Tips for Travelers. In previous videos, I've spoken about 10 types of cabins to avoid and also how to get an upgrade on a cruise. In this video, I want to talk to you about 11 perfect types of cabins for 11 different types of travelers. First of all, what is the perfect cabin, especially if you're worried about noise or other interruptions? This is probably the best and biggest tip that I can give anybody looking for a cabin. When you find a cabin, no matter what grade it is, whether you're interested in an inside cabin, an ocean view cabin, a balcony cabin, or even a suite, the best cabin to choose, which is going to give you the least amount of disruption, the least amount of noise, is a cabin that is surrounded by cabins on all sides. So you have cabins above you, you have cabins below you, you have cabins on either side, ideally with no interconnecting door, and either opposite you, you have cabins, or you have something that is going to be very, very quiet. Those are perfect for everybody because you are going to have the least amount of interruptions. It's going to be the quietest option on board. So the perfect thing to do if you want a great quiet cabin is to go for a cabin that is surrounded by cabins on all sides. The second type of cabin is for people who are quite the opposite. They're party people and they're going to be out as much as they possibly can. So even if you are a party person and are only going to spend 5 or 6 hours a night having sleep in your cabin, it is still the one place that you're going to spend more time than anywhere else when you're on a cruise. The cabin is still the place that you're going to spend the most amount of time, so still bear that in mind. I would strongly suggest that you go for an inside cabin. So the great thing about those cabins is they're dark because you don't have windows, you can have no light coming in, so it's perfect for people who want to go to bed really early in the morning, they want to sleep late, because they want to be out and party. So an inside cabin is a great idea. The third thing to do is, what about if you want a cheap cabin? So the perfect cabin for you, whether it's an inside cabin, an ocean view cabin, a balcony cabin, or a suite, you still want the cheapest at that level. The thing to do is to not choose a specific cabin, but actually go for what's known as a guaranteed cabin. Now what that basically means is it's the cheapest price that you can get for whatever level you're going for, and the cruise line allocates a cabin to you. So what they do is, once people have gone and chosen specific cabins because they want to be in a specific cabin, so whatever's left over, people who've booked a guaranteed cabin get allocated one of the cabins by the cruise lines. So it is the cheapest way to get whatever grade of cabin that you want. Now clearly the cheapest cabin of all is to go for a guaranteed inside cabin. So if your main objective is, I want the cheapest cabin possible, book a guaranteed inside cabin. My next tip is, if you're concerned about getting seasick, the most important thing you do is choose a cabin which is in the middle of the ship and as low down as possible. Now the reason for that is, when a ship moves, if there are rough seas, is it pivots. So it pivots on an axis like this, and so in the center, low down is where you can have the least amount of movement. If you are worried about getting seasick, middle of the ship and as low down as possible. Now what if you're a solo traveler? Now the thing to watch out for is, cabins are designed for 2 people to occupy. So if you're occupying that as a solo traveler, you're going to be charged a surcharge, which could be anything between 50% to 100%. So it becomes very expensive. The great news is that most cruise lines are bringing in ships which have cabins specifically for solo travelers, which is fantastic because you can avoid all those surcharges. Now there are many, many ships that do that, but some of the most innovative of all are, for example, on Norwegian cruise lines, where they've created a whole area for solo travelers. It has a specific key pass, it has a lounge area, and all the cabins in that area are for solo travelers. But pretty much all cruise lines have it, whether it's on Royal Caribbean, whether it's on Cunard even, Fred Olsen, P&O, all these cruise lines are starting to introduce solo cabins. So what about families? Now, there are 2 suggestions that I have. First of all, let's talk about families traveling with really young kids. So kids that basically need to be in the same cabin as you. Now the thing to do is to cruise on cruise lines that have specifically created family cabins. Most of the big ships, whether it's Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, P&O, Disney obviously, so there's a lot of cruise lines that cater for families. They've created family suites or family cabins. So these are cabins that are designed and have configurations where mum and dad or parents can sleep, and space for kids. A lot of them now have specific cabins which are designed and are big enough and have beds that don't have to be pulled out at night for families. Any cruise lines that's basically advertising for families, take a look at those if your kids need to be in the same cabin as you. Now, what if you've got older kids? Now, one of the big issues to look out for is most cruise lines will not allow you to register to have 2 kids sort of under the age of 18, and it depends a little bit on the cruise line, the age, but you can normally not book a cabin specifically for kids. So if you've got young teenage kids, you can't book a cabin for them. Now, there's a couple of ways around that. One of the things that I would suggest you do is book cabins which have an interconnecting door, and book 1 adult with 1 child in one cabin, book 1 adult with 1 child in the other cabin. However, of course, when you move in, the parents can be in one cabin and the kids can be in the other cabin, but you've got that interconnecting door. So you can then sort of be as one as a family, but your teenage kids have their own space and their own cabin. Now, of course, you don't have to have an interconnecting door. You could just book 2 cabins that are close to each other, but you will have to book it as 1 adult and 1 child if they are under the age of 18. Now, check with the cruise line because those regulations change slightly, but you can't book a cabin on most cruise lines just for children. Now, what if you want to go luxury? Well, there are a lot of options in terms of suites and luxury. If you're looking for a great cabin, take a look at some of the cruise lines that have created ships within ships. So, for example, on MSC Cruises, they have the Yacht Club. Norwegian Cruise Lines has the Haven. And these are little controlled areas. You use your key card to get into them. But all the facilities for those people traveling in suites are available. So many of them will have butler service. They'll often have their own swimming pool and deck. They might even have their own little access to the spa area. They'll have a lounge where perhaps you can have breakfast, drinks, canapes. So if you're looking to go luxury, look for cabins that are in ships within ships. Of course, there are many other options. Most cruise lines have suites. So if you take, for example, Cunard, their Queen's Grill have butler service. They have a specific lounge. They have a separate dining room. The other thing to do, of course, if you want to go in luxury, is book a cabin on an all-suite ship. Now, these are much more expensive to go, but things like Silver Sea or Seabourn. So what if there's a group of friends, 3 or 4 of you traveling together, and you want to share a cabin because it ends up being much cheaper if there's 3 or 4 of you in a cabin. The great thing with ships is basically you can have your cabin configured either as twin beds or double beds. So you can then have 2 separate beds, and then you have the sofa bed option. Now, if you take a look at many cruise lines and look at the plans or talk to your agent, find out those that not only have a sofa bed, but have a curtain between the bedroom area and the sofa bed area. So, for example, many of the cabins on board the Cunard ships, for example, particularly Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, but I've been on many, many other cruise lines where they have this, where there is a curtain. So the great thing is, if there's a group of friends, some of you can be in the bed area, you can have the curtains closed, some of you can be in the sofa bed area, so a little bit of privacy as you're getting dressed, changed, whatever. So look for cabins which have that option, but also have a curtain dividing the 2 areas. So I've spoken about party people, I've spoken about people that really like to go out and have a great time, but what about people who want to go on a cruise and they want some little private time? Now, clearly on a cruise ship you could perhaps find a nice quiet corner, but if you like the idea of retreating into your cabin and having your own little private space, what I would also recommend you do is then book a balcony cabin. The great thing about a balcony cabin is you can then go out on your balcony, you have your little private space, your little private time, so you can have all the great features and benefits and activities of a cruise ship. But if you just want a little bit of quiet time, you can then retreat to your cabin and you can sit on the balcony. You can still have the sunshine. If you're in a nice warm climate, you can have the breeze and you can just relax, you can sunbathe, but you have your own little quiet havens. So my last tip is around accessibility. So what if you have a wheelchair or you have limited mobility? Well, this is might be an obvious one, but all cruise ships have accessible rooms. And it's really important if you're going on a cruise, make sure that you book one of those if you do have a wheelchair or accessibility issues. They tend to have them at all grades, so it's an inside ocean view, suites. They all have accessible cabins which have wider doors, more floor space to move around. They also have, showers rather than baths that you can wheel yourself in. Many of them will have things like call buttons, things like cupboard space and storage space, which is accessible from a wheelchair level as well. So do make sure that you book an accessible cabin. That's a whole range of cabins for different types. The most important one of all is if you are going on a cruise, I strongly recommend when you're looking at your cabin, no matter what grade it is, book a cabin that has cabins above you, below you, either side of you, and opposite you. That is going to be a cabin that has the least interruptions, the least amount of noise. So no matter whether you're a party animal, you like to retreat, you like quiet space, whatever you are, you're going to find that is going to give you the greatest chance of having a great space. Of course, if you book that, try and make sure that you have a cabin with no interconnecting door, and then you basically have this little great space that you can retreat to no matter what type of cruiser you are. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, I'd love it if you gave the video a thumbs up and a like. But very importantly, please subscribe to Tips for Travellers and get much more travel inspiration, advice and tips.